This podcast comes to you from nerdsthatgeek.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Nerds That Geek special presentation. Joel and Tim's countdown to Party Down.
Are we having fun yet?
I'm having fun. I'm continuing to have fun. Joel Tyree Lewis here with my esteemed co-host, the Tim Girard.
Hello.
We are here to discuss season 2 of Party Down in preparation for the February 24th release of season 3 of this beloved cult classic series. God, I sound like a professional, like I do this. What is that? What is that? Listeners, please be advised, I am not that good. I am that cheesy at this, and I'm leaning into it today. So we're into season 2. We're going to do season 2, episodes 1 through 5. Then we're going to take a short break. Listeners, you won't know the difference. It'll be a separate episode. And then we'll talk 6 through 9. Nice. And then we will watch the finale of season 2 live as a commentary track for y'all. So without further ado, let's get right in to season 2, episode 1. Jackal Onassis backstage party.
First of all, I love the whole like Jackal Onassis as being like, how can we do like Marilyn Manson, but not, like.
I didn't even connect it to like the Kennedy's aristocracy. That's so good. Of course that's why it's Jackie Onassis. Jackal Onassis, just from it's such a good joke. Anyway, Tim, do you want to take the lead on this one? My notes are all over the place on
So like, I don't know, true to I feel like most season 2 episode 1, true to form, we kind of have this after, season 1 ended kind of with shaking a bunch of stuff up. We start this with kind of the new status quo, right? We knew Casey left at the end of the last season.
Oh, real quick, I had forgotten the context. Sorry, last season that Henry had begged her to beg him to stay, and then she left. I forgot that was like the episode. The penultimate context to the finale was, hey, I'd really like you to stay, even though Henry kind of dragged it out of her. That was like kind of a thing. But I was watching this second season, like to start, I was like, oh, right. That's the jump between those two episodes. Sorry.
And the cruise, I think she mentions the cruise was 9 months. So we kind of get a nice timeline as far as like, okay, it's been at least, or I guess we don't know that until we see Casey come back.
Right.
So we know that some time has passed. When we see that she's back, it's like, oh, her cruise of 9 months must be done. So, okay, that gives us a sense about 9 months have passed. And I mean, I guess to be fair too, the difference between, her asking him to stay and not to go back and live with his parents, in this case, it's kind of like, this is her pursuing her dream. I feel like him asking her to stay would have been a whole different
it was a different kind of ask for sure. That I was thinking that too, that like, that's to please come here and continue to have fun and don't give up and go home to your parents is different from please don't take this job that would be really good for your career and you get to do the thing you love to do. Like that, those are two wildly different things, but a lot to handle in that close of proximity.
Yeah. And that's part of it too. Like seeing that happen, like the way I kind of look at it is it was sad, but I get it, and I think that was kind of Henry's thing too, is like, I think that's why I don't think he does ask her to stay. I think he's more just shocked by the whole thing and how she has to leave early that night and go pack and leave. And that's it. Like, I think that's kind of what made it really, really shitty, but yeah, like what can you do? Be like, oh, well, I'm not moving in with my parents for you. You should miss out on this cruise for me, kind of thing. which is I think why part of why when she comes back, like I mean, he's awkward, but like he's kind of like, okay, yeah, she's coming back. I know about it, and he's trying to deal with that, but he's not like, oh, f that b. It's like, yeah, like okay, like you got to do your thing, but I was still hurt by it, and
You can also tell he's
and
like more invested in the job. Like he is,
oh yeah,
he's in charge and
he's
he's
Ron now,
responsible. And
yeah.
like not to jump into it, but like the sorry, I had you introduce it, but I was thinking like one of the dynamics of this season is when Henry's in charge, nothing's on fire,
Hmm.
really. It's so chaotic because Ron is a shit show. Like the tone of this is very relaxed. I feel like it's because Henry is like taking the reins and he's just better at handling things. And it like it's a different dynamic, I
Yeah.
feel.
Well, and it's I forget what episode it is, but at one point I think Ron is telling Henry like, "Oh, like you can't try to be friends with them," type of thing.
Yeah.
And not that he was trying to be friends with him, but I feel like Ron definitely had this sense of I need to establish dominance as the
Yes.
boss to make myself feel important. Whereas with Henry, it was like I have a job to do. I have to do the job. It's my job to tell you all what to do. It's your job to do it. But I don't think Henry was filling some personal void by being the shift manager or whatever, or the team manager, whatever it's called. But yeah, I do like when they have that moment where he's like talking to them about acting more professional, and everyone's kind of like giggling. So it's just like, oh yeah, you sound like Ron now. But even when he's saying it, it is coming, I think, more from a place of like things are starting to not work the way they're supposed to,
Mm.
as opposed to like, hey, I told you to do something, I want you to do it because I told you to do it, kind of thing, which I feel like is more of Ron's vibe. But yeah, I feel like he's definitely a more chill boss, and like, not as angry. And I think that's the thing too. Yeah, like when you see someone doing something they're not supposed to and Henry has to talk to them about it, it's more because if you keep doing that thing, I'm going to hear about it from the people who hired us, and then I'm going to have to come down on you because of that. Whereas with Ron, it was more personal. Like, hey, I told you not to use your phone and you're using your phone, like
Right.
that kind of thing. But
There's a cloying difference to it too. Like
mhm.
that, like because Ron was like so desperate for validation in it too,
Yeah,
and it was like he kept pointing at the structure, like this is how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to follow the rules. You're supposed to be in line. Like I
yeah,
want you. Like it's such a different philosophy. Whereas Henry's like, I get it. Like none of us want to be here, but we're here and we get paid. So let's just like do it. Let's do the
yeah.
thing and
Hmm.
we'll get out of here.
Yeah. I also, oh, so we have like Lydia returns in this one, Maggie Mullally's character. We get to hear about her ex-husband Ed, which kind of becomes like we hear a little more about him throughout the season, so that's kind of fun. Where it's like, you know, and we also hear about her daughter Escapade, which I think we
Escapade.
already actually. Oh, and that's what I wanted to say too. I have not seen anything from season 3 except for the trailers that have kind of shown up.
Uh-huh.
My prediction for season 3 is that Escapade actually makes it, because like in
Oh,
the
it's
season,
Escapade.
I think so, because in the season you see like where Megan Mullally's there, but she's not working with them. So I think
Uh-huh.
she must have hired them. So I think there's some party for Escapade or something like that, where Escapade's made it big, and that's how she kind of has money. Because yeah, she's kind of talking to them about them all coming together. That one where Kyle's like, "No, it sucks," It's like, "Oh, it must be great to be back together," like in the preview. So I think that's sort of my prediction is what's going to bring them back together. Is I think Megan Mullally wants to hire them for this big party for Escapade, and now that she's made it and stuff like that. So
I
so
still
that'll be
want my
interesting to see, right?
what I would like most. Each episode, a different cast member is famous and ends up getting party down to cater it. And so like
Oh,
everybody's at a different level on like the wheel of fortune. Like everybody goes through it, everybody's doing well, everybody gets to suffer at the hands of their former colleagues. I'm pretty sure that's not how it goes, but that would be that's the fanfic in my heart
yeah.
about it.
Yeah, that would be super fun. I like that idea. That's great.
I love that on the phone, Lydia goes, study the Hannah Montanas, and then go to bed on the phone to escapade. Like, study the Hannah Montana.
So I think my favorite thing about this episode is the whole Prince and the Pauper that they do.
Yeah, they
Jackal,
really.
Onassis, and Roman.
Yeah,
And I love the guy. I don't know the actor's name, but like he was one of the creepy brothers from It's Always Sunny in
yeah,
Philadelphia.
yeah.
He was also on Psych for a while. I forget who he played on the show Psych, but he was, yeah, he's like, I feel like most of the time he's a creep when he's playing. And yeah, so like it was so cool to see that switch. And then like I also wrote down, I want to be called Dennis. Like he wanted to have this regular name. I want to be a real regular guy doing a regular job, and I want Dennis to be my name.
It's so great because like he enjoys it. He thoroughly gets to enjoy that. And I don't think we ever get that from that storyline usually. It's like they're both miserable, I feel like is the
Mhm.
moralistic way or this most satisfying way. But it was like really cool to just see him like, yeah, this is awesome. Like he's like enjoying the gossip and like
Yep.
he's like fueling it too. Like it's really cool. Like I liked that. That was such a cool thing to see. I don't know that I've seen that in another show. Is that dynamic, and it's just great to see again. Like Roman is gets the things that his shit kickery earns him. Like he does not get to succeed.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, who he is. Like even when he's kind of given this thing that's supposed to be like the keys to the kingdom, it's like he's still, still can't close. He still fucks it up somehow, and like I like when he even has that talk. It's like, oh, you have to like, yeah, you have to not want it, and that type of thing. And and then I feel like he actively tries to, act like he doesn't want it, but it's just like, yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways that was kind of what Kyle was also trying to teach him too, is just to kind of like kind of be kind of chill and aloof, and kind of let them come to you. And it's like, I think he just feels like, oh, okay, I have the makeup on now, I could just go after them. And but I this was, and I'm sorry that this has become a theme of this podcast, but like comparing things to The Office. But I
Yeah,
like when he
that's been my
signs the
favorite
girl's,
thing about
yeah,
this.
when he signs the girl's boobs with his own name.
Uh-huh.
It reminded me of how like the scene where Meredith has her pelvis broken, and when Jim signs it, he
Yeah.
signs John Krasinski instead of Jim Halpert.
Ron is gross in this one.
Yeah.
Like the mode of Ron in the second season is a very he's like what is that? He's greasy. He's
Hmm.
like wet and
Yeah.
greasy. With the hair. Like I think in the second episode, I think the look that he was going for was like half-baked Fabio because the hair is like mid-length and the shirts are kind of like loose around. Like he's definitely
Hmm.
going for like a certain model of a certain era, but it's a little undercooked and he just looks still wet and just gross.
Yeah, there's more of like a slouch to him, whereas I feel like his whole thing, and in the first season is like very upright, very kind of tall and broad and big, and like, and now it's just kind of more like frumpy, somehow. Yeah.
And he fucked it up. He lost the super crackers 6 months. He only had it for 6 months. And then he's in like this awful relationship, and you kind of are recalling what he and Constance were talking about. It's like, yeah, this guy is not a person in a relationship. He just kind of follows around like a puppy dog,
Yeah.
and it's not great. Lydia's hilarious. Also, like
Yeah.
that mom energy. Also,
Hmm.
she's like a civilian. Like
Right.
when
Yeah.
we get to the football episode, like it's a different dynamic because she finally understands where she is and can
Hmm.
navigate it really effectively. Whereas everything else, she's kind of like they like plucked her from Grover's Corners or something. Like she's just
Hmm.
like she's like handling it all really well, but not really well. And she's a sharer, like she's oversharing to Casey the second she's there. Like, and then the hip thing, it's
Yeah.
like the signal. She's like, "Give me the sign if you need me to come and rescue you."
Yeah, and she's
And,
like, I've never done that in my life. And she like
and then
catches.
she's just doing that. And she's like, "No, not the signal." And I guess the other thing that like it's a different pacing. I think the episodes in the first season are much faster paced and there's more
Mhm.
things going wrong. It's more chaotic. And
Mhm.
I think there's more space in the show in the second season, I think. And like one of like the ending moment of this is Henry got the autograph for Ron's girlfriend.
Mm.
Like, so we start to kind of see like, no, they were actually friends. And I don't think we got that from the previous season. It was just kind of that dynamic made it so. And I guess maybe that's the thing is like Ron in charge wouldn't harken back to them being friends because of that hierarchy.
Right.
But maybe because Henry's in charge and he can feel that like that's okay as like a professional thing to still have
Yeah.
this friendship with him. So I thought that that's a cool like lighter note, and it's also like
Mm.
when Casey coming back, it's awkward, but like they start to get into their shtick again, and
Yeah.
it's not as hard as it feels, and it like Henry seems to have moved on to a certain extent. Obviously, we kind of see that crump. Spoilers, everybody. The thing we want to happen, and I think that's the other thing is like we start to root for them in this season a bit more. I think. And the last one is like really kind of electric and nebulous and kind of it fun. But I feel like in this one, it's like, oh, it's starting to be like really like feelings, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Well, yeah, like I mean, the fact that like them going through this kind of ordeal by, at least like having that confirmation, but then being like torn apart, So it's like, okay, there's stuff left unresolved, and you kind of want, whereas like, yeah, if it was just a fling, then it wouldn't have mattered, but
Right.
like you see that there's still more if it's still kind of there in his mind enough that when she comes back, it's like, ooh, okay, again, he's trying to be professional and kind of, hold that out, but he's obviously not like super resentful of her. Again, like he was hurt and sad, and I think that's understandable. And like, he's with Uda, but you kind of, yeah, you definitely get that sense of like, okay, like seeing the way their relationship started with the way she asked him out, like, this is how well is this actually going to go, long term. And we hear more about that later on. I think in episode 3 we hear a little bit about their relationship, but yeah, I think yeah, it was neat. It was kind of going from this workplace hookup to like, oh, this could actually grow into like a mature relationship, and
Okay, so episode 2, the return of J.K. Simmons. It's such a bit. We'll get to that. Hang on, I'll introduce the episode. It's episode 2, Precious Lights preschool auction. There is just the tirade to end all tirades, like we are farmers, bum 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 bum. Again, in this episode, we'll get to it. I really liked in this that Casey starts to do like the pranking needling thing to Henry with the tip jar
Mhm.
thing, like that switch and how playful it is and how like that's really them kind of getting back to like a dynamic that's comfortable and they're actually friends. And I thought that was so cool to see is like
Mhm.
she's excited to have something to bug him with and to have
Yeah.
Ron as an ally who's doing it to for whatever deluded like I not psychos like not the right language, but just like it's hard to watch. Like he's just so self-righteous
Mhm.
and so arrogant. Like he was this perfect manager and or team leader. It's like, no, you fucking weren't, man. You either vomited
I just
or
love that
had your
part too. That like,
dick
oh,
out.
can I
Like
see outside?
every other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I love how Ken Marino like always finds new ways to make that
Yeah,
character awkward.
it's like a whole different gear.
That's the thing is like and it's just like, yeah, like no matter what, you're just like uncomfortable to be around him, like through his various
Well, that's
phases.
the thing. We're seeing him as he would like to be. So with the car, with the
Mm.
girlfriend, calling her lady friend. Oh, ugh, just gross. And then like the hair and the aesthetic, like it's all his choice. And it's so funny to see how it oscillates from that and then new Ron, who we will meet later. Stupid. So stupid, this character.
Uncanny X-Men
Yeah.
#4. I thought that was sort of like a fun, nerdy thing to kind of, really kind of have like, the comic collector in us to, be like, oh man, like, making that something that like, I feel like that's probably the most excited we've seen Roman up
Yeah.
till this point. I mean, later we see him more excited when he meets one of his sort of idols, but like, seeing something that like, oh man, like this is, and it makes sense. Yeah, like of course he'd be into comic books, and this is something he would want, and that whole bidding war that ends up happening with him and Kyle for the the other guy, and
Oh my God, the Karen, like the organizer, Mrs. Doyle, was just like the
oh
second
yeah.
she popped, like just like I shriveled away. I was like,
Mhm.
oh man, not that archetype. That she played that really well. That was awesome.
Mhm.
Also, Casey at one point is on the phone about an audition and then talks to Henry and just says exactly the thing is like, it's a decision that might validate like every decision I've made for the past 4 years, or it totally invalidate everything and I should just give up. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
Casey, just say the thing. Don't just say that to people. That's
Yeah,
rude.
just dropping that bomb. Yeah. Well, I love that too, that her saying that also includes like her decision to leave at the
Mhm.
end of season one, right? So it's like almost like the fact that she trusts him enough to have him be able to, think about this question, this idea without getting his personal feelings involved and be like, no, your decisions are obviously terrible because you chose to take this gig instead of staying with me, like even though he's, heard about it, like knowing that she made that decision as a way of moving her career forward and that that's led here, and that it was a sacrifice she made too. So it's like, if you can feel like, all right, I made this sacrifice but it led to this thing and I should have done that thing, or like, yeah, like if you don't get the gig, then it's like, oh, I left Henry, for 9 months to do this one thing, but it eventually led to nothing, so maybe I shouldn't have done that. And so I love how complicated that is, both with her
Yeah,
own, like
it's
tracking her decisions throughout her own life, but actually how it
universal
affected
and
Henry,
personal.
and the
Yeah.
fact that he's kind of like, you're not like this outside party, like I was involved intimately in one of those decisions, but like, being a friend and being like, this is how I should approach this and not be like spiteful and angry. And is that when I actually have hug over the bus bin? Is that when this takes
Oh,
place?
I
Like
think.
where he says, I can't remember
Huh.
exactly, but I remember that was a really sweet moment where she
Yeah.
like leans over to like hug him, and it was just like, to see that like, this awkward connection between the two of them, but like that they were, there's still something there. There were still embers.
There's just so many things. Sorry, it's just JK on the phone. Sorry, I don't want to get to it yet. But this is like, at least
Yeah.
look at me when you're fucking me. I guess that's the organizer or the person who's hosting it at her house, right? I think she's the one that says that about the Tom Hanks thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
And okay, also the acting in here. So it's you learn that both Kyle and Henry are like, Henry's an incredible actor, which we'll find out in later episodes as well. But like Kyle fakes out Roman and makes Roman feel like an
Mhm.
ass, and is so satisfying. And it's also cool to see like kids got the chops. Like it's good. And
Yeah.
that relationship, I
Yeah.
think we're getting to know Roman more. He's slowly becoming a better person. Very, very, very slowly,
Yeah.
but he is. But also freaking Ron is sad and drunk and sad, and he's talking about Eddie Money versus Eddie Murphy in Trading Places. I'm Dan Aykroyd, you're Eddie
Oh yeah.
Murphy. And Henry's like, none of those people are in that movie. He's like, Eddie Money for sure is not in that movie.
Have
Oh,
you
I
seen
love
Trading
that movie.
Places?
I love Trading Places.
Yeah, I saw that
Who's
as a
been
kid.
putting out
Yeah.
their coals on my flow? I Merry Chris. He's got Dan Aykroyd plays a really dirty Santa, and he has
Oh,
the
when he's eating
hand
the fucking
turkey through
turkey through
his
the
beard
beard.
in
Yeah.
a gutter.
Oh.
Great movie, Trading Places, circa like 78. That's an early
Well,
movie.
one of my favorite moments too is like how sad it was too when J.K. Simmons is like, "You'll never work in this town again." And Henry's like, "I know."
I
Like
know.
like not hurt at all by that statement. Just yeah, I think it just shows like how much he's actually given up. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like, oh man, I was thinking about it. It was just like, yeah,
It wasn't
okay.
even
Like,
needling. Like
yeah,
it
not
just,
not threatened by that at all. That decision was already made. That's not a decision that was made here. Like,
God, that's so much sadder.
yeah.
So I am going to quote in full a line here. I don't know how much of it will make it into the actual episode's listeners, but like Starz wrote this, so Starz would want it documented. Tell that fucking prick 2 hit shows in 5 years is enough to get most guys fired. You must be really sucking the shit out of Mickey's little rodent over there at Mouse Schwitz, Tim. He says the word Mouse Schwitz at the end of this is the most outlandish thing I have ever heard in my life. I'm like shaking. What is this joke? Mouse Schwitz? Can you do that? I don't know where I this, help me, Tim. Help me. That's the joke.
Again, yeah, like what year did this come out? Like, it was much before the time when people would just like run to social media. If one wrong person hears this, goes to social media and is like, we need to cancel J.K. Simmons, we need to cancel, everyone involved in the show, and there is that sense of like when you have a character who's supposed to be a shitty person saying things, right? Like, and I think this is the thing too, like in normal stuff we don't think about things like in terms of heroes and villains, right? But like when villains do shitty things, you're like, yeah, they're the villain, of course they're doing insane shitty things. But when we have like a regular story where there aren't clear cut lines like that, it's like, oh my god, this person said that, and it's like, yeah, they're a villain, like of course they said, like Cartman, like Roman, like all those type of characters, like they're there to say the shitty stuff so that we can point them and be like, this is a shitty person who says shitty things,
It's just
and
so funny. Like after the
it's
last episode, we talked about him in it, whereas you were like, there's like a Mad Libs grammar to what he does. And then he just flips the script with the first thing he says. And it's so much, Tim. Just like, and then he follows it up. The follow up gets me too. He's like, tell him to bring knee pads and an appetite for man juice. We are fucking farmers. Bump a bump a bump a bump. I was dying. And I was like, did I like the second season? Because after the first episode, I wasn't like dying laughing. It's not the same energy. And then JK just comes in here with that. I I I laughed and then I tutted at myself and then I laughed again because it's not okay. That mouse has a family.
well, and which is weird because I feel like that's almost more relevant today. Like I feel like that's definitely, there are some people who are definitely upset about the fact that like Disney is buying everything and then deciding what people can and can't do, and the idea of like this indirect censorship, because it's like, oh, if we want to export this film to other places but those people won't play certain things, we're going to leave those things out of our films and products. So essentially we're letting other countries censor what we're doing. There are a bunch of people who, I think do feel that way about the Mouseville, so it's like,
I just had never heard it quite put that way before. I don't know why it didn't leave a bit. I think I was just shocked the first time I saw it. I must have just not not remember. I blocked it from my memory, but this time I was taking notes. I stopped it. I had to rewind it back a couple times. It's like to get the specificity of that line and the venom with which it is delivered is one of the most, I don't know what the word is for what it was.
Well, it's funny too how you keep bringing up like the whole farmers thing, where it's like, yeah, like how did they watch this role and be like, yeah, you're the guy? I could see how, and I forget which came first. Like, did he do J.J. Jameson first, or was this first? Oh no,
Oh, that would
Jameson
have
must have
been
been first because this was like
yeah,
2009. Did we say 2010 somewhere around there? It's like Spider-Man was yeah. So
yeah. He'd have
so
been
like I
Jameson
definitely
before.
see more of that through line where it's like, oh yeah, after you're playing J. Jonah Jameson, like coming in and doing this, it's like, yeah, of course, this is just Jameson up a notch, like all the stuff Jameson wishes he could say.
This is a double shot of Jameson.
That's what I want to see. I want to see like someone like merge these two together where it's like a shot of him on the phone and then like Peter Parker there, like he's waiting to drop off pictures and like Jameson screaming at someone on the phone saying this stuff and he's like, oh man, and then he's looking at Peter's pictures and like saying shit to him like like that type of stuff about the pictures and
I wanted to be that this character on the phone with Jameson
oh
and
man.
them just going back and forth.
Oh God, that would never end.
It would never end.
Talk about a unstoppable force meeting an immovable object.
Okay, so I think we should move on to
Mhm.
episode 3, Nick DeCinto's Orgy Night, starring the impeccable Thomas Lennon. Just so good. I love.
Yeah, I love that bringing in again like I mentioned before like anytime we see kind of other people from the state working their way in and there's another actress who comes in a later episode from the state also and just that kind of sense of like kind of pulling from like okay all of these people what's all this the people they've been in episodes with before and pulling them in and that sort of like almost I don't want to say incestuous, but like yeah, where it's just
Yeah,
like you're using that same crew over and over again, or different variations of it. So it's fun to see that, and like people who you're used to seeing kind of interact in a different way, and now they're in completely different roles. But
this is such a
and
great premise. He's like the perfect guy. He's the right height
oh
and the
yeah,
right
yeah,
like body fat index to be this
hmm
guy. Like it's just such
yeah, and the right level of like uptightness. I feel like yeah,
yeah.
like he has this kind of pent up feeling about him all the time.
And expect like the expectation. He's like, oh, I was so convinced it would be better on the outside, and this is what it ought to be, and it's not, or he's not found the confidence or the people. He's not done any. Just a cold start orgy. Also, is the kind of the thing is really
Mhm.
funny to me. Is like these are his coworkers and shit. Like who did he put it out on? Everybody got an invitation, so he went to Kiko's. It's like I would like 30 of these, please. So my closest friends and family. And I feel like getting the
Well,
invitation, you're like, I mean, he's going through it. She left him. Like,
yeah. Well, and that's another, again, another through line for this is the comparison to The Office. This has like the Robert California vibes
oh hell yeah.
when he's having the office people and it's like so fucking awkward because he just wants to have an orgy and everyone else is just trying to be like chill and have a regular ass good time. Again, yeah, just divorced, same sort of thing.
When Ryan and Gabe are still dancing after he's fallen asleep, and they have that moment where Ryan's like, "Hey, let's go to we could stop. He's no longer looking." And then Gabe is like, "So leave." I was
Yeah.
like, "This is a different level of totery." And it just is so sorry. I flashed right. I love that episode so much. Like those later seasons get kind of rough, but that one I just hang on to.
Mm.
At one point, Oscar, I'm sorry, listeners, this is just a deviation from me. But at one point, Oscar, California is talking about sewing two bears together to make a single rug. And it's like a waste of two bears. And Oscar goes to both these bears, to both these bears. Or I guess Jim starts it, but then Oscar
Yeah.
insists on it the second time. Anyway,
But I love too that like he kind of has like Roman type energy in this, where it's
uh,
like kind of and there's even a part later in the episode where he said he criticizes the people for having hangups, just like Roman's talking about in the earlier porn
yeah,
star episode,
uh,
and that idea of like thinking that just like oh without hangups people would just have sex with everybody and not care like the idea of taste and actual attraction and preference between like yeah, I don't actually want to have sex with this person. It's not a hang up. I'm just not interested
the correct conditions have to arrive, as we learned in the
Well, and that's what I love about it too, is that like for some reason Roman finds himself in his element, like probably this idea of like he said, oh, I've
Yeah.
read a lot on the topic. So
Uh-huh,
it's like,
uh-huh.
again, like I feel like if it almost reminds me too of people who try to like play therapist to other people, and it's like, oh, I don't have my shit figured out, but I see that you have a problem and I'm going to tell you how to fix it. And it's like, why don't you, it's, I feel like in that sense, for some reason Roman can tell someone else how to do it, but he can't sort of fix it within his own life to do the things to make it happen. And yeah, so I really like that, how he all of a sudden becomes this like sage, to this other guy, but through nothing that he's actually done in his own life, just like
Right.
through reading and kind of seeing things play out. Um and oh, so yeah, so another funny thing I saw come up that was like a reference to earlier episodes. At one point, like the guy mentions how he works in estate law, which is what I think the job of the guy in in season one, like when he's talking about switching places with Henry, he's like, you know anything about estate law? So it's like funny that like that's like the go-to job of like people with nice houses who, are have all this stuff, but they're still kind of unhappy with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I do estate law. Like, or maybe that's just a big thing in California. It's like if you're not trying to be an actor, you're in estate law. Like I don't know, but I thought that was interesting. They had the same job.
Yeah, that's funny. I wonder if it's like a search and replace. It's like when we want something that sounds like an adult with an income, they're in the
Yeah.
state law.
Yeah.
Like Ryan always said to tell girls that you work in finance. I love how casually and how seriously Tom or Lennon delivers the "stay out of the room."
Oh
Like he
yeah.
just says it so, and I don't probably shouldn't have to say this, but I will. Stay out of the room. You're like, what is happening? What is this event? And it's so creepy.
Oh yeah, and this is the one too, right? Where I think, yeah, not where Kyle pretends that he's kind of breaking. Like Kyle actually finally like has a moment of crisis where he kind of starts to doubt himself as
Yeah,
he talks to that other woman. I think it's interesting too that like I mean, we know Kyle and by now, and that he can kind of talk to women and be flirty, but he knows how to be super casual and conversational about it. So you never really know when he's talking to this woman, like, is he actually just having a conversation, or is he trying to subtly hit on her and get it? But like it seems like, the fact that he seems like super chill. I think even when she's topless, he's still just like having a normal ass conversation with her. So again, like I'm not sure if that's just him actually hitting on her and that's just his way, or if he's just really trying to be like, hey, I know you, we're both trying to make it, we're both doing things, and just being optimistic. And how much she like shuts him down as a person, like not just like, oh, stop hitting on me, but just like, thinking that everything he's been doing is a joke and that he's not going to make it, and that we like really see him have his first moment of doubt. And oddly enough, it's like Roman who has to like talk him
yeah.
back up.
And he does a good job of it too.
Yeah,
It's actually a really generous thing. Like I think we're all gonna
yeah,
make it. It takes him
yeah,
so long, he drags it out of him, but he does say, like, no, I think you're gonna make it. You're gonna make it. We're all gonna make it. And
yeah,
it's such a hopeful, vulnerable moment. And I think it pays off so well because he's such a kicker too. It's like
yeah,
slowly we're kind of unpeeling him. Something about Kyle in that episode is like you kind of get how out there he has to be, like kind of putting himself out there
yeah,
in all of these interactions. And it kind of in this season it really focuses in, you can kind of see him doing that more,
mhm,
and like how it doesn't always work. And I feel like you kind of see how much Constance had an
yeah,
impact on him.
mhm, yeah. I was
His
just thinking that. Yeah,
positivity and how he would flip things is like, well, there, you just got to keep doing it. You just keep
mhm,
swimming in a certain sense. And it's really kind of sweet to see how much of an impact that had on him. And like that's one season of that kind of growth. And that's the thing. It's a quieter second season. I'm really thinking like that is the thing
mhm,
about it, is we're getting more into the characters. And
yeah,
Kyle becomes more nuanced because you see that he has that surface thing, that affability, and you kind of see him and Roman teaming up more, and that's like them more in sync and more like meeting each other more halfway, which is really kind of
yeah.
cool to see.
They almost have this like Superman Batman relationship kind of. It's like
Yeah.
they start to almost like complement each other, where
Yeah.
one of them on their own is like the worst, but when they're together, they end up like balancing each other out a little bit.
Yeah. And then this one we have another Ron and Henry moment. I think they're sitting on the curb and like smoking weed together, and there's like again they were friends. They
Yeah.
enjoyed working together, and that dynamic is now coming back because nobody's putting this rigid hierarchy in between them. Ron,
Yeah.
like,
And I love, yeah, this is where we get to hear a little bit about Henry's relationship with Uda too.
yeah.
The,
Where
yes,
he's
I
apologizing.
understand.
Yes, I understand. It's such a genuine. I love that for Henry. That's the other thing is like it's cool that he has that because before he had Casey as kind of or as one interaction kind of like that, and it's cool to see him get to have that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then him and Casey reconnect in this episode as well. Like they finally kind of get more on the same footing and doing shtick, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I love who too that at the end of this episode, Kyle, like when he talks to that woman again, that actress, and he says, "Don't stop believing," which was like another callback from the season finale where like Henry's got to say something to Ron to get him motivated. It's like, yeah, don't stop believing, you know. So I love that it's just kind of like, okay, this is just going to become the go-to kind of stay positive, like just keep going, you know.
And just like all like Lydia is just so unfazed by everything. She just kind of takes everything. Like I don't remember the context, but just really fun. Oh, the porn. Like she's just trying to make it work. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Is like she's like, I see a middle-aged man who needs somebody.
Touch, yeah.
Yeah, like it was really interesting to see that dynamic of like, oh, he's a mess, but it's like I know how to clean that mess. Like that's predictable and manageable, and I see a nice house.
Yeah, yeah, for me and my daughter to come stay in.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem mercenary. It seems like realistic, and you kind of see like what her skills are, and like what like that because she's kind of moony about that. Like she just kind of goes through everything, kind of like smiling at it. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to see that she's also kind of like got an angle too in a certain way, and so that's cool. I hope people are enjoying listening to this because I like this is a really good show. I think it's really rich and it has all these things. But that's why we're doing it. That's why we're counting down.
Yeah.
So episode 4 is the James Ellison funeral. This is a bold choice. And I think what they did was they took, all of the microaggressive racial tension of all of season 1, and we'll get it all out in one episode. Roman, seriously, I don't know how linear we want to be with this episode, but Roman seriously is actually the phrase jungle fever to a grieving daughter. What?
Well, and I what I love about this scene is how well they encapsulate like that idea of, like nowadays I think we're much more well versed in the idea of like, it's not good enough to say I don't see race, how that's like a privileged point of view. Like, it's only people who aren't affected by their race, and have to live life in a different way because of their race, will say that. And again, like this is taking the person who is, to some degree, quote unquote, a villain, and kind of putting these type of words in their mouth. And it's like making you examine if you've ever said something like that and Roman's saying it, you probably have a problem with, that you should kind of work out, and I think it was because again, like this came out like a while ago. And I think, it's only relatively recent that I've kind of, again, like I feel like social media helps all of this where it's just like everything's right there all the time and updated instantly. But yeah, that idea that like that's not like a cool point of view to have where it's like, oh, I'm post-racial, I don't like that's what I wrote, the post-racial idea. Like I'm so evolved that I've moved past thinking about race. Therefore, I can say shitty and racist things because I'm not being a racist, And I think he even says that too. It's like, oh, what does he say? It's it's semantics. I'm not being racist. That he to him, he gets to decide that he's not being racist regardless of what he says because he's post-racial. And I feel like, like again, this is back in like what, 2009, 2010, to kind of put that under scrutiny and say like, yeah, like we know Roman is shitty. Like, again, we're starting to see him develop into a person, how he relates to other people and being more like empathetic. But when he's still like, oh, here's an idea that I have locked in my head that I've thought about, in a bubble, and I think it's right and it's the way to think and whatever, and present myself to the world. And it's just like, no, man, like, and yeah, to put it in that situation where this is the worst possible time you could say these things, but yeah, I mean, they're wrong all the time. But like, again, like having Roman say those things is a way of being like, you should not be saying these things. If you are saying these things, you need to re-examine your life. Like
there's something really effective to the frequency of the, because he's saying so many things in such rapid succession, they're all shocking, and they're like it really amplifies them. And I think in a way, like microaggression by definition is something that seems offhanded, seems small, but they add up, and that is the problem. And what this episode does such a great job of doing is amplifying every little one of those by putting them one after each other.
Yeah.
And that the impact and the tension and the awkwardness, the cringe of that is really effective. And it's
well, it's also like the doubling down. It's not like, oh, I said something that could be a microaggression, right, and someone called me on it, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm sorry I said that. I shouldn't have said that. It's like, oh, let me respond with another micro. So it's the fact that they're in rapid succession, but it's the fact that they're coming that way because he's doubling down, because he's not realizing and having that sort of sense of inner monologue of like, ooh, I said something that I've had the thought in my head, but I've never actually said it out loud before. Now that I do, I shouldn't say it out loud ever again, and probably should stop thinking of it also. Instead it's just like, yeah, no, this is great. I'm dropping truth bombs on you, like that kind of thing. And
yeah, it's really interesting too, because like they're playing two tension games throughout the whole episode. It's that dynamic, and then also that the mistress, the other woman with the kid, shows up. And it's really interesting, like all of the tension in the racial situation is amplified and contributed to by Roman just continuing. And the other side, like it's all the tension on the other side comes from Casey and Henry thinking that they have a traditional marriage. So, and then it all kind of evaporates. And it's really interesting, the tension between those two dynamics and those two sources of tension in the episode, because like how that release, it's like a really clever release, because you could kind of like, oh, at least that's okay. Like it gives you kind of that breath of fresh air to kind of like, I don't know, like it has really sophisticated tone manipulation in it, which is really interesting.
I also think a part of that too, in a different way, was the whole like, I have the notes, Kyle wants to learn the blues, like that whole thing of like, it's fun to see, and I feel like with Kyle too, like Kyle has this very optimistic, which doesn't always make him right, but at least he's coming at things from a place of this, this sort of optimism and sometimes blissfully ignorance. Whereas like with Roman, it's more just like, I know better than anyone, so I'm going to say whatever the fuck I want, and whatever, it's fine, but like, I like that we see this sort of sense of appreciation that he has. It's like, I want to learn the blues, even though it's kind of like, well, yeah, like you're missing the integral part about the blues and this, but like how I love how the guy is just like, all right, I'm gonna with him, and so we get kind of that other end of it where it's like, okay, at least there's some bit of and again, as the the yin and yang of Roman and Kyle, while Roman's taking this whole stance, like Kyle is like actively kind of subverting himself to learn, and to his wishes, and I love too that by the end of it, like he's not pissed that this guy was just
not at all.
Like he chose to see it in a way that he actually learned something, and then like it makes him like more likable. Like it makes him, it's kind of like he's bumbling through this thing, but like, he was like trying to learn something, and even if it was just like, yeah, I know you're just with me, but I still learned something, and
That's
then when
again, that's
they're trying to,
constants. Like
hmm?
that's
Yeah,
constants too. Like
yeah.
that's again, that's another note I had for this one is just like him see the thought experiment of like when she was having that whole backstory for her character, she's just living in it and playing with it and just accepting it, and it was
Yeah.
just cool to see that he's like that too, and it's kind of unfathomable in a really charming way, like that's really cool.
And I like this again, another Office reference when him and Ron are singing the blues was the whole like Daryl and Michael.
I
I
wrote
like
that down too.
I love that the guy like ain't got no belt. Like that was his thing.
Ain't
Like,
got
okay,
no
I'm gonna take
bill.
this. Like, yes, he took my belt. I have no belt. Okay, like how am I? This is the blues somehow. Me not having a belt. He's like trying to work those things in together. And I also love when Kyle and Ron work out like harmonies. Like, oh, I go low,
I
you go
go low,
high.
you go high.
Like that.
I go low, you go high.
Oh, so good.
It's crazy also, like because we get that dynamic of power shift where Ron is on the team, not the team leader. Like he's funny in a
Mhm.
different way. Like he gets to come at the character in this different way, and it's really funny.
Yeah,
Like he'll just kind of them playing around with that, the harmonizing was really fun. Like to
yeah.
see. It's like you were fun when you weren't being an ass. Oh, and then the second woman
Oh
with the
yeah.
second child.
I love to, yeah, like after we get the wife kind of admitting and being chill, like, oh yeah, I always knew he had a mistress. I didn't know who she was, and just like how calm she is, and like, like, oh, okay, like, and then you're kind of like, oh, that's not so bad. He had a mistress, and then you're like, oh no, he had two mistresses. And he had, he was, I like on Fight Club, the party's like for setting up franchises. Like how his dad would just have families all over the place.
It's such a specific reference. I love that so much.
That's how well I know that movie.
Well, and I think it's an interesting dynamic too, is because it's like what is because the most insulted person, the most kind of traumatized person is the daughter. But it's also
Mhm.
like, did you want your parents to tell you this was the dynamic? Like what is their responsibility to you to let you know that like this was I like it just was an interesting kind of
Yeah.
really kind of early like 2009 for that kind of like to have polyamory be a plot point but not a like the villain plot, just like kind of like,
Right.
oh cool, just kind of there, matter of fact, not the
Mhm.
reason for the season but there, just thought that was interesting.
Well, especially after she had given the whole talk about the crock pot.
Yeah.
And it's like you're thinking that like, oh, like yeah, like she totally relied on this slow simmer of a relationship, but it's like she forgot the other half, that it's like, yeah, you have the crock pot, and then you have like the McDonald's fast food. Like you gotta have them both.
Oh, and then the Ron in the casket joke to like reminded me of Bob's Burgers where he's in there and the kids
Oh
load
yeah.
him into the but like don't open the bottom.
I love too that like Henry calls him out when he's like, "Oh, I saw everything. I saw." He's like, "Oh, when you were stoned, locked in a coffin, like, like, oh, what a surprise! Someone on drugs had this epiphany about life and blah blah blah, and like how unfazed and like Henry is by that. Like, I thought that was funny too, because I feel like that's I've kind of been on that end a little bit, where it's like, the few times I have, and it's like, oh man, this cool thing happened, but it's just like, well, if you're on drugs, like how real is that thing you experienced, or is
They
it the
have a
drug?
very short half-life too. Like that's the thing.
Mhm.
Like it's like, oh, I have all this energy. It's like, oh, that was because you
Yeah,
put chemicals in there.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I just like what a horrifying concept, to be
Mhm.
like claustrophobic, dark, and in like the physical representation of the greatest fear humanity has is that we don't know what's on the other side of that pillow. Like just Terrifying. Anyway, on that note, we were getting to the final episode discussed on this episode of Countdown to Party Down, episode 5. Oh, I love this one so much.
Yeah, this is
Steve
one of my favorites.
Gutenberg's birthday, and we are introduced to New Ron and just a ridiculous rebirth of New Ron and Steve Gutenberg. I want to be held by Steve Gutenberg. Like, I just want to hug this man. He's so warm and so
Yeah.
gracious and generous in this. It just makes me happy, this episode.
Well, and that's what I love about this is how when we first see him, like we don't know who he is. I mean, this
Right.
is like, yes, this place takes place in LA, but it's also like people playing characters. So he pulls up and you're like, oh, you might go, oh, that's Steve Gutenberg. Oh, you know, he's like when we see, you know, J.K. Simmons, he's not playing J.K. Simmons, you
Right.
know. So it's like you see, oh, who is this character? And it's like, it's actually Steve Gutenberg. Like, holy shit, like it adds this like extra like meta layer to it. And yeah, like he's like the same guy. Like I remember seeing him in like Police Academy and Short Circuit and 3 Men and a Baby, like from when I was a kid. It's like that same like smiley, like, you know, like super optimistic, super nice, like, you know, just kind of like, you know, you know, I would think that it's like, yeah, like this is one of those actors who got famous and rich but did it right, you know, like use that wealth to kind of enjoy their life, not just to be like, I need to do so many drugs that I'm killing my body, you know, like just so like, you know, yeah, like yeah, just I wanted to be in his house in that episode hanging out. And or you know, it's also a model for like, if I ever do grow up to be famous, that's the kind of famous person I want to be, you know,
Right.
where I have this house and, you know, and it's like, oh, hey, yeah, like call your friends over, we'll have a party for my birthday at my house, might as well, we have all this food and you're here, like whatever, you know, like just so fun and so like, you know, so optimistic towards everybody else and positive and like so great.
Oh, just sorry, we haven't talked about it before, but like Henry keeps bringing up the fact that his apartment has a view of the Taco Bell, and
Oh
it's one
yeah.
of my favorite lines.
Yep.
This comes back. Oh, we get to see Henry be an amazing actor in this episode. Like,
Yes.
this is such it's like the creatives get to be creative this episode, and it's
Mhm.
like so cool to watch. And it like, I love the subplot of like Casey discovering this indie movie and sneaking away to watch it and being like,
Mhm.
oh, you must be in pain because you were good at this and like must have enjoyed it and felt the thing that I feel doing my thing. I love that vehicle for that development in that relationship. I think
Yeah.
that was so cool. I mean, also like, no kidding, I love that a movie plays a really big role in a romance. Like,
Well, and I love how there's like the 1-2 punch of it too, right? Because she watches the movie and then gets to act in a scene with him right after that. And it's just kind of like, you
and
know,
he acts the shit
you know,
out of that schlock.
yeah.
Like, he's great.
Well, and I love and yeah, and leading up to that too, like from that writer perspective, I love that like when Roman and his friend McLovin, you know, when they're kind of doing their thing and how you know Steve Gutenberg, like even though they're acting like these, and that's another thing I feel like, well, this comes up in a later episode, but like how they're writers and they're so shitty about actors, like, oh, actors are fucking hacks and they're terrible. It's like, if you're writing a screenplay, who are you expecting to act these roles in your screenplays? Like, and how, you know, Steve Gutenberg kind of makes them realize that like you're writing for people, like you've got to connect with these people who are going to be reading that. Have you ever heard your words read aloud? Like, I love that he adds that dimension, you know, and again, it's Roman in general. He's just so stuck in his own head because he thinks he's smarter than everybody. And the best conversation he's ever going to have is the conversation within his own mind. And it pulls him out of that. And like how he's talking about, yeah, courage, no risk, no reward, like how scared Roman is about and uncomfortable. And he just like, he pushes it, but he's not being a dick. He's trying to help him grow as an artist and he just pushes for it. And like everybody's doing it and getting all excited about it.
The
And
part
I
that
love that. I
slays
love how
me,
bad it is the first time, you know, like,
yeah, it's just at the end, it slays me that he's like, why didn't I ever think to rewrite it? Like, I that like I watched this pretty late, and I started to learn that, but it was just like putting it out there as like, yeah, that you didn't think to rewrite any of it, like how silly that sounds, and how specific to the nature of the thing you want to do it has to be. You have to get good at that. That's its own skill, and it was just it was so cool to see that come out of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like they say that whatever the percentage is, but like, 5% inspiration, 99% perspiration, or whatever that is. But like, yeah, if you're not rewriting, this is only 5% of what it could be. You're stopping after the inspiration and not doing any of the work, like, and assuming that like, oh, the way the thoughts rolled out of my head is the best version of what that could possibly be. Like, no, like you're dead wrong. Like, and it's, yeah, so it was great to see him go on that journey and like and actually like acknowledge that it worked, like that's what I was really surprising. Yeah.
You can see the excitement and the that's the thing. There's the creative in there. And he's like, we don't see that. We just see the kind of shitty, like he's done all of that behind closed doors. He's not, all of his walls are up. And he finally kind of see like, and it's really sweet because when he's like uncomfortable and doesn't want to do it, he's almost like really respectful to Gutenberg. He's like Mr. Gutenberg. Like he like last names him. So it's like a really, really vulnerable place for him. And I think that's so important. And it pays off. Like this is multi-season storytelling. Like I can't even imagine what season 3 is going to be like. It's going to be incredible. Like if they can thread the needle, and like I'm excited to see if they can. Like it's a great show. I'm going to watch whatever version of it. But it's really rich. Like and it's already in conversation with itself. The differences between season 1 and season 2 are really, really striking.
It also really helps to binge watch it, because I feel like if you were to watch it over time, you would forget about a bunch of the lives in one episode, and you wouldn't catch it when it back later. Like the estate law thing. Like how random is that? Like I didn't catch that the first time I saw this, and it's between like episode 1 of season 1 and then season 3 or 4. But it's like again, I had watched season 1 recently enough that like, oh, that stood out to me. Like I caught that, and and other stuff like that, and kind of looking like more actively following like Roman's growth. I feel like, yeah, you kind of see him as fitting. If you're kind of watching episode by episode, you're kind of, it's like the whole, heating up a frog in water versus throwing it. It's like when you're binging it, you're seeing boom, 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 like all these hits of like Roman just like climbing these stairs in a lot of ways, not always, but in a lot of ways. He's still a little shitty, so in a lot of ways, but yeah, like, you definitely notice it more and all these other things.
It's just like I had written down you don't know. Do you understand what AA is for? Like everybody kind of gets to shine in this, but like Ron creates his own hell by putting shrimp in the fucking iceberg sculpture. And he calls his sponsor from AA to come help him unclog the drain. Awful. And then he's like, oh, he called you to help with the drain. It's like, no, you've made the man relapse. Feel bad about that.
Well, I thought it was weird too. Like I seeing that like with Ron, and I don't want to talk a lot about this because like I don't have much experience, but like when he makes the distinction between like himself and AA, where like there's almost like a switch. Like once he kind of gets like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna be the new manager now. Like I don't need alcohol anymore. And he just kind of like turns it off, and he kind of goes like back to being just like instant. Like with the other guys, kind of like being around the alcohol, it was like this big temptation. Whereas with Ron, it was more like he was depressed and he was looking for alcohol to kind of numb that. But like once he had something else to focus, like, oh, I don't need alcohol anymore. And just kind of like, moved away. And like, I got kicked out of AA, but I'll be fine. I have my job to focus on now. One of my other favorite parts about this is when like, at the end, and again, this just encapsulates all of like Steve Gutenberg's like positivity and vibe when I think he tells Henry, right? Like 9 times out of 10, if you've got the talent, you break through.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I like that hit me at my soul. Where it was just kind of like, yeah, like not everybody makes it, but like to have someone who's made it and who's been through it and kind of seen people go through it, and that, how many people who do make it, it's because they kind of stuck it out, right? Like, like a lot of people that, you don't make it instantly all the time, and there are plenty of people who, you know, and there are plenty of hacks who don't make it, because they're not good, but, which, so that was, again, one of the things I love about this show is kind of going on Henry's journey with him, because I've been there and I am there. And, even where he is with this show, it's not like, as far as we've seen yet, he doesn't like make it big within the context of season 1 and 2. So it's not about him arriving, it's about like whether he's kind of still trying or actually giving up and everything like that. And it was just so cool. It was just like such a cool sentiment. And again, there's no specific advice there, like what do I do to break through, but that it's, and I guess he also could be completely wrong. It could just be that he's an optimistic person where it's like, yeah, 9 times out of 10 and I like how Ron, how I mean, Henry's like, but what about the 10th guy, like,
see, this is the saddest thing. And I think that that's such a big difference is when Henry says that, Gutenberg doesn't have a reaction.
mm-hmm.
He can't even acknowledge it. And I think what's really interesting is that's where he stops. And I think what Steve sees is like, I'm fighting, the battle is over for this guy. Like he is that one guy. Like he's going to be that one guy because he doesn't have it and he's not excited about it. He's not doing that thing anymore. And it's just really, it's like, it makes me, I love that sentiment about like it being 9 times out of 10, but that little grace note at the end, the coda of it is Henry isn't putting that out there and it sucks.
Yeah.
I think your video could come back on that one. Okay. Looks pretty.
And the other part of that too, and I think I quoted it because I think I went back and like wrote it as he said it, but he doesn't say if you've got the talent you'll fall into it, like you'll break through. It's like the chicken breaking out of the egg. Like birth kind of has to be painful and you have to fight your way through it. And if Henry doesn't have the fight left in him, then he's not going to break through, Right. So I think that's part of it too. And maybe he didn't, part of why he stops there is he didn't have the heart to tell him is like, if you're worried about that one guy, instead of being like, I'm one of the 9 guys who made it, then you've kind of already decided that you're not going to make it, like what's that? I don't know if this is a new agey saying or just like a toxic positive statement or whatever, but it's like whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
And I think Henry's at a point where he thinks he can't. So it's like, well, then you're not going to, and that's kind of the thing is like, the breaking through is implied that you have to make the effort, but it's not that it'll be handed to you, it's that you have to break through. But if you have the talent, you can and you will,
Well, on that note, I think that's the end of the 3rd episode of Countdown to Party Down. I'm still having fun yet. Are you having fun yet still?
I've been and still and will always be having fun yet.
We remain having fun yet. We'll see you next time.
Bye.